Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Charlie Smith. I work in the pre-sales team for the UK, and today I'm going to talk about automated DR testing. Can your backup provider do this? It's a very interesting topic, and when I speak to clients about disaster recovery testing, the long and short answer is that there's never enough hours in the day to do it. It just provides too much risk to the production environment, and as a result, a lot of customers don't test their disaster recovery plans as often as they should. Obviously, that's putting a massive risk to the business around downtime. If you can't test your DR plans and don't know how to recover quickly or minimize the loss of data, then your business is really at risk. So today we're going to talk about some of the things that can cause disaster recovery planning to fail. We're going to talk about understanding RPOs and RTOs. We're also going to talk about some world statistics that we've done some surveys on about backup statistics. So it's interesting that you'll see that there's a big discrepancy between what people would like to have in place and what reality looks like. We're also going to go through a live demo today as well, so you can actually see some of the automated DR testing tools in action, and I'll explain how we configure those in Arcserve UDP. And then we're going to finish off just summarizing, talking about potential next steps, and open it up for questions. So hopefully the session will last around about an hour or just under, and hopefully we'll have time for questions. If any questions, if you do want to raise any questions during the session, we have a questions panel on the GoToWebinar software. You can also email emirinfo@arcserve.com. That goes through to our European pre-sales team. So depending on where the questions come from, we will have the relevant person look at that and respond as well. So sometimes you have questions that come to mind after the event, so just remember that EMEA info. Okay, so we're going to get underway. Hope you enjoy today's session. So the business, your business reality is that these are industry statistics. 24% of SMBs fell victim to a cybersecurity breach last year, which is quite high. That's nearly a quarter of small businesses had an impact around CryptoLocker, ransomware, and other security threats, which obviously can affect downtime of their business if servers are not available. 71% of organizations experienced downtime in the past 12 months, which could be a few minutes, or it could be a few hours, or it could be several days. Obviously, in IT, we're always striving to have the highest levels of availability for your infrastructure and your services that you support the business with. So it's a problem and it's a concern, and I'll show you this in another statistic shortly. The average cost of downtime per hour for an organization is about $300,000, which is about £250,000. That's the average cost. Obviously, for smaller businesses, it will be less than that, and for large multinational organizations and global businesses, it can be much higher, and that can go into the millions. 78% of SMB organizations don't feel confident or good about their disaster recovery plans, which is really quite worrying, that with all these threats to your data and the actual statistics on downtime experienced, that 78% of businesses don't feel good or confident about disaster recovery invoking a DR plan. 35% average IT reduction in IT managed costs. So organizations are giving less money to IT, which obviously causes a squeeze on your data protection solutions. This is why a lot of vendors and customers are looking for alternative solutions. There's also other reasons why customers have been using legacy products for many years, or they're using multiple backup products, and they're looking to consolidate and reduce costs as well. 38% of those going to cloud are driven to enhance disaster recovery capability. So a lot of organizations using cloud are not just using it for running production workloads for their business, but they're also looking at how cloud can provide backup as a service and disaster recovery as a service in the cloud as well. We also ran a World Backup Day survey about 6 months ago, and it was quite worrying actually in many ways that 79% of the respondents categorized that they had mission critical or business critical data, but less than 15% said they had a high degree of confidence in recovering their data should downtime or a disaster event occur. So there's a massive mismatch there, that everybody recognizes that they've got business critical data, but only 15% or less than 15% had a high degree of confidence that they would be able to recover it efficiently and quickly in a DR situation. We also asked the participants in the survey to mark their top 5 concerns, and cost of downtime was the highest impact to the business. You know, the cost of being down for a significant period of time. Obviously, increased risk from ransomware attacks was very high on the list as well. And as you can see there's a number of other reasons. Complexity of managing varied types of data and systems, meeting regulatory compliance around GDPR in Europe and UK. Also concerns about limited IT resources being available. And over half of partners revealed their customers don't have a DR plan in place. So that's 56%. And of the customers that do have a DR plan in place, more than half only test it once per year or less. So a lot can happen a year. You know, you can change infrastructure, you can change business processes, your SLAs might change. But if you're only testing that once a year, how do you know that changes made in your infrastructure are going to be able to recover without impacting your DR plan? You know, so there's a lot of worrying statistics there. And as I say, some of the main reasons for that is because DR testing is a pain, and we'll talk a bit more about that later on. So what are the most common mistakes made with DR planning? And this is actually information from Search Disaster Recovery. It's available online. I actually put the URL in there, so I'm not making this stuff up. But one of the main reasons is to fail to scope out what's important. And this goes back to what I was just saying before about if you're doing DR testing once a year or less, a lot of changes happen to your infrastructure. And you could write a DR plan, you know, and stick it in a filing cabinet and put it on your ops shelf. But if nobody's kind of updating that document as changes are made to the environment, it quickly becomes out of date. And often, you know, when plans are being created, you know, identifying the most critical systems and the infrastructure that's dependent to run on those systems is key. You know, it's all very well backing up a server and being able to test it, but if you don't have the networking resilience and the SAN resilience and, you know, the server resilience and everything in place, then it's like a domino effect. One piece of the cog can let you down. Fail to focus on data restoration times. That's a big one. Often customers are doing DR testing, but it's kind of random tests, or we'll stick a tape in a tape library and just restore from a single tape, or we'll do a random restore of a small server. But obviously that's not real world. The only way you're going to test restoration times is that you need to restore big systems into a test environment, you know, because a lot of organizations have got file servers that are multiple terabytes in size, large SQL databases, applications, etc. And these are the systems that need to be tested because they're the ones that hold the most business critical data. And also learn from your mistakes. You know, there's no shame in saying that, you know, we made a mistake in our plan and we just need to update it. You know, we didn't take this into a consideration, or we've now tested this and we realize that procedure doesn't work. There's a couple of missing steps that need to be put in. Your DR plan should be a living, breathing document. And, you know, it's like a best practice document. It shouldn't just be a one-off process. It should be constantly being updated. You know, it should be an electronic document that you can edit and post. And make sure procedures and oversights and mistakes are updated and corrected when realized. Okay. So DR testing itself, this is a must-have and not a nice-to-have. you should be able to test under a controlled environment, which shouldn't impact your production environment. So when customers say to me, oh, we're worried about DR testing because it impacts the production environment, if you set up your environment correctly, you shouldn't have that problem. Every customer should have a controlled virtual environment that they can do testing without impacting their production environment. And if they don't, they should be asking the business for that. That should be a basic requirement for disaster recovery testing. Also, you should be able to test your recovery time objective and your recovery point objectives. These are a key to meet the business SLAs. Often the RPO is very much overlooked. The recovery time, I will talk about that in a minute, but the RPO is key to understand how much business data you can afford to lose in a DR recovery process. And I'll explain that in a minute. Failure to test could lead to significant downtime, have documentation in secondary locations and saved in the cloud, because obviously if you've got a file, a folder with all your DR procedures in sitting in your ops shelf and your building burns down, no one's going to be able to access that. So you should have documentation in multiple locations and also saved in the cloud so it can be accessed from anywhere. And understanding RPOs and RTOs is absolutely key. The recovery point objective is quite simply the frequency of your data protection, and this has a massive impact on how up to date your data is when you're recovering. The reality is most customers today still only back up their data once a day, and for the vast majority of systems that's absolutely fine, but you will have tier 1 critical applications and databases that actually, if you lost up to 24 hours worth of data in a recovery, that would have a massive impact to the business. So the RPO needs a lot of attention in understanding, with the business, if we had to recover these critical databases, how much data can the business afford to lose, and what you think is acceptable versus what the business thinks is acceptable could be completely different. So it's worth having that conversation to understand, is it acceptable to lose 4 hours worth of data, 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, or is it could be down to hours and minutes, in some cases. There is technology out there that can protect your data more frequently, and if your backup solution that you're currently using only has the capacity to run daily backups, you need to start looking at alternative solutions. Now, the recovery time objective is a bit more well understood. That's simply how long does it take to get the system back online after a catastrophic failure, or even a failure of an individual server could come under this terminology. So the RTO is quite important. Obviously, that determines how quickly the systems are back online. And again, that can vary between different tiers of servers. So for business critical applications and databases and file servers, you might have to have an SLA of an hour or less. For low impact systems like file and print servers that are just providing print services on the network, or or just servers where their data doesn't change that much, the impact might be less, so you can recover them. And you should have a sort of priority when you're restoring for disaster recovery. Obviously, your critical systems need to be recovered first, but before you recover the critical systems, you've got to have DNS running, Active Directory, AD services, etc. So it's important that you understand the dependencies of the systems and make sure that the underlying services that need to be in place before you power on your databases and your applications are also regarded as tier 1 and in that plan as well. So isn't DR testing a real pain? These are questions that customers often ask themselves: is how can I test without impacting my production environment? Do I have to test in the evening and weekends? How often should I test? Once a year, every 6 months, monthly, weekly? Really, there is no golden answer to that question. It all really comes down to, how often does your infrastructure change? Obviously, the more testing you do, the more prepared you are, the less likely you're going to experience an event that you didn't sort of factor into the plan. So I would say once a year is a bare minimum, but ideally I think you should be testing weekly or monthly in many cases for different aspects of your disaster recovery. And we'll talk a bit more about that later on. There's a lot of staff overtime and pizza deliveries. I remember that in the 90s, when I used to be a Solaris administrator for a large company in Liverpool, we often used to have disk failures, where engineers had to come in to replace disks, and we had to rebuild file systems and recover data. And we also did DR testing. And when I look back, actually, it was quite a lot of fun in many ways. You didn't see it at the time, having to sit at 1 o'clock in the morning in a data center, but it used to have a good laugh. But anyway, the point is, you don't really want to be in that situation where you're having to pay a lot of staff overtime and paying for pizza and takeouts because people are hungry and they're working many hours on top of their normal working day. And does my backup solution have the capability to automate all of this? And that's really a key question as well, is that modern data protection solutions more and more now provide integrated disaster recovery capabilities and testing tools. So again, if you're using a traditional solution that doesn't help you in that, then you need to start thinking about alternative solutions. So what if you could schedule DR testing through your backup software? So it's automated, testing without impacting your production environment, automatically test without any user involvement, customize your tests with scripts so you can basically do some clever stuff like run SQL database queries when the SQL database service starts in a DR test, or send test emails, do other scripts that basically almost sort of go through the process of how the application works in the real world to make sure that when it's being tested, things are happening in the background that prove that the infrastructure and the application, the database, are working correctly. Understand the RTOS and RPOs for your critical systems, being able to measure that, understand how long it actually takes to power on a virtual machine, in a DR test. So when you're actually looking at your RTOs, you have a confidence that by testing regularly, you can meet those RTOs around for the business. Ensure your recovery points are validated to guarantee there's no data corruption. Another big benefit of DR testing is that you're booting up systems from your backup storage, and it's a great way to validate that your backups are good, because if you're doing it regularly, you know that if the system powers on successfully and it works, your backups are good as well. So it's a good way of validating your backup data. Test in any location. You should be able to test in production if you want. If you would rather run the tests at the DR site, if you've got one, great. If you don't have a DR site, what about doing testing in the cloud? So again, there's lots of choices there, and the cloud testing stuff is becoming really popular now. So any organization leveraging cloud for backup or DRAS as a service, they can take advantage of that and actually run testing in the cloud without going anywhere near their production sites, and doing it all offline. And also have RTO DR test report to show you your management and auditors. It's all very well being able to do DR tests, but if you can't actually show what's been tested and how long things took to start up, it's kind of pointless, really. So the reporting is really important. You can we've seen organizations get discounted with business rates and other things by showing their auditors that they have good cohesive disaster recovery tools in place to automate testing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into a demo. I'm going to quickly jump into my storage lab, which will just take me 1 second. So what we're going to do now is, this is the UDP console. The UDP console is really where we manage all our backup and disaster recovery automation from. So the dashboard kind of shows you high-level statistics in UDP. So it's monitoring all the various data protection tasks. So we're monitoring backup, replication, offload to tape, virtual provisioning, DR testing, which was called assured recovery, and every task in the product. We're also showing you your dedupe ratios. So UDP provides very powerful global data deduplication of all the backups. So I'm actually using about 187 gigabytes of storage, and I've got nearly 900 gigabytes worth of recovery points in my store. So this is just a small lab. in the real world, we often see customers getting 80-90% data reduction in terms of what they're holding on disk versus the actual storage used. We've also got the RTO report showing you the recovery time objectives. So this is linked to SLA profiles, and this is where we can do DR testing and monitoring the recovery times when we're doing the DR test versus the SLAs to make sure we're in compliance. So this is showing everything green, so that means all my various restores and DR testing have been recovered within my SLA windows. We also have the RPO reports showing you how many recovery points you're taking every calendar month, the frequency of your backups, so when was the last backups taken, what's my oldest recovery points. It's also highlighting any breaches in your RPOs. So if you've got schedules to kick off backups at certain times and certain frequencies, and they don't get invoked for whatever reason, you'll get red bars appear to say that nodes are at risk because you're not delivering on your RPOs. So in terms of the actual testing, we have obviously in the UDP console, we can go out and discover nodes, virtual machines from VMware, Hyper-V. We're going to be launching Nutanix integrated support very shortly as well. So we'll be able to do agentless backup across Nutanix, VMs. We already support VMware and Hyper-V for agentless backup, and we can deploy smart agents to back up physical servers. Now, the great thing about UDP, it doesn't matter if it's a physical or a virtual backup. We can do virtual provisioning, DR testing on any recovery point taken. UDP's also got full integration into Office 365. We can back up NAS shares as well. So it's got a pretty comprehensive platform support across Windows and Linux environments. So what I'm going to do now is show you the plans. The plans are basically where we create our tasks. So I'm going to edit this plan in a second, and this will show you, for example, we can add multiple tasks. It's kind of like a workflow. So if you see on the right hand side there, I've got an agentless backup. I then replicate off-site to the cloud. I then do a monthly offload to tape. I also create virtual clones from the backups for DR, and I've also got DR testing defined in this task. So if I click on this task here, you'll see that there's various tasks available. So this is a backup task, and you can go in and add nodes that you want to back up, for example, and this will pick up the VMs that you've discovered previously. You can also set it up to do auto VM discovery, and it will auto update the protection. So for example, if you deploy new VMs across VMware and Hyper-V, it will automatically add them into the backup policy for you. So you can add in more VMs, you can create your backup destination, your backup schedules, etc. So with UDP, we can do daily, weekly, monthly backups. You can also schedule high frequency backups to run every 15 minutes, every hour, between time ranges in a day. And then you can control how many recovery points. If you want to hold 14 dailies, 5 weeklies, change that to 6 monthlies. And you can do high frequency backups as well. So I might want to keep 12 hourly backups, for example. So it gives me an RPO of every hour, for example, if I'd set that up. And then you've got advanced options where you can truncate your application logs, things like SQL Exchange. You can also invoke hardware snapshots, so we fully integrate with just about to launch Nutanix integration, but also NetApp, HPE Nimble, H3 FreePAR, and we're also planning to add others in the future. You can also configure real-time alerts for any tasks that we add into a plan. So everything runs from the backup task. So once the backup completes, the replication will wake up, and we use ddupe around the replication. So here I'm replicating to my cloud server, which is offsite. And you can do things like bandwidth throttling, so you can add in throttle schedules. So if you want to, limit the amount of network being used at certain times of the day, you can also add multiple bandwidth throttle rules, so you can do that. You can also have, different retention policies on your DR server. So I might want to hold 7 dailies, 5 weeklies, but I might want to hold 3 years worth of end of month recovery points in the cloud instead of having to use tape, for example. So you can vary the retention at different sites depending on what you're trying to do. Then I've got a copy to tape task, so my monthly backup migrates off to tape. I then have virtual standby. Virtual standby allows me to create virtual clones, fully independent virtual clones. And I'm connecting into Hyper-V. One of the nice things about UDP is you can actually provision across hypervisor or physical to virtual. So I could back up VMware in a production environment and spin it all up into Hyper-V in the cloud, or into a DR site, you know, running a different hypervisor. So we can basically provision across hypervisors. We can also DR test across different hypervisors as well. And then you've got all the rules about the clones and what volumes you're creating the VHDX files on, the DR, etc., how much resources you want to give. Now, the key one I'm coming to now is a DR testing, because this is really what we're talking about today. And in this task, I've decided that I want to test monthly. You can test weekly, daily, or from any recovery point taken. You can do it after every backup if you wished. So the nice thing about this is every month I will connect into my test environment. Now, there's two types of testing you can do with DR testing. One is you can spin up the backups as instant VMs. When you do this, it actually spins up the VM from the backup storage, so it's not actually using any additional storage on the hypervisor. So when we do instant VM, it creates an NFS mount point. So in VMware, it creates an NFS data store, linking back to the backup storage running on your appliance or your recovery point server. And in Hyper-V, we just create a mount point, and it links back to that mount point. You can also do instant virtual disk testing. So if you've got very large file servers and you don't really want to start up the whole system, you can actually mount the virtual disks as virtual volumes into a test network. And this allows you to mount the file system. You can then run scan disk, check disk, and other utilities to basically scan the data and guarantees it's all readable and it's in a good state of health. And that also constitutes to a DR test. So it's not just about spinning up DR systems, you can also scan file systems that are mounted as virtual volumes for DR testing as well. So I've got it set up for VMware, but you can see in the drop-down list here, you can select Hyper-V and configure all the DR testing in Hyper-V. But the process is very similar. Doesn't matter which hypervisor you choose. Obviously with VMware, you can either do it directly with an ESXi host or vCenter. I'm connecting into my vCenter. Obviously, it asks for the data store that you want to use for the DR testing. So my large data store is VMFS. But again, you know, you can select that from a drop-down list of what I've got NetApp, Nimble storage, other storage available there. You also have to have a proxy server available. The proxy is like a virtual proxy that invokes all the various commands. We can do DR testing on Windows and Linux servers. So if you have only Windows, you only need to define a Windows proxy. If you have Linux, you also have to define a Linux proxy server. A Linux proxy essentially is a server running the the UDP disk-to-disk binaries on it, which is quite a simple process to set up. I'm just going to be doing Windows testing for today. You can also set it up in a use DHCP settings for Instant Virtual Machine Gateway, which is a default. You can also select what network you want to do the testing. So a prerequisite for this is that you have to create an internal test network in your VMware or Hyper-V infrastructure. It's really easy to do that. You can just right-click in vCenter and create a virtual distributed switch, but it isn't connected to the outside world. It's just a test bubble, and you can do the same thing in Hyper-V. It's really easy to set up. You can basically do a Google or go to the Microsoft Tech Docs, and it tells you how to create an isolated network in Hyper-V. So it's really simple to do, but that has to be in place because we need to have a test network to spin up the VMs on. You can give the VMs a prefix, so you know that the VMs that pop up into the console, into the inventory, are test VMs. So the default is UDP AR for assured recovery VM _ followed by the VM name. And then you've got various other settings. So you can set, for example, that the VMs will use the IP settings that they pick up from the production backups. So essentially, it will use the production IP settings if you tick this option. So it means it's using the same IP addresses as what's used in production. And the VMs can actually communicate with each other when they're in this test bubble. So I've done some really clever projects with customers where they've spun up the AD server in a different plan into the test subnet, and it comes up as a test AD, and we can put a script in there to say leave that running for 2 hours, and then when we start up all the other put DR testing tasks in all the other plans, we've got authentication available in that test network. So obviously it can't authenticate with the production AD, and if you're trying to power on a SQL database or something like that, it needs to be able to authenticate if you want to test the database or the application. So there's a lot of customization available, and you can select what network adapter type to use for the testing. In the schedule, obviously you can schedule it to run at certain times of the day, but by default it will power on in this workflow. So once it runs through all these tasks, in my case, once a monthly backup has been taken to disk, it will automatically invoke. But if there's certain times of the day you wanted to exclude, for example, you can factor that in here. And then in the advanced tab, this is really important. We have a placeholder to run scripts, and we understand exit codes. So this is really the key part of the process, that if you want to customize your DR tests, you can invoke various scripts that will run SQL commands or can basically wait. So rather than the server shut down straight away, which is the default behavior after it's been tested, you could say leave that VM running for an hour and a half. Maybe my SQL team want to run some test reports, and they can log into that server and run test reports on production data before shutting it down. So there's various reasons where you do. You can also create alerts in there. So if your DR testing fails or it's successful, you can basically send out an alert. So it's really quite straightforward to set up, and any server in this backup plan will be invoked. So if you've got, for example, 100 servers to back up, but you only want to do DR testing and 20 servers, you would create 2 plans, one with a backup policy and one with a backup policy and DR testing for only the nodes that you want to test. So it's quite easy to split plans and only test on a subset of your environment if that's what you want to do. So once you've actually set all this up, everything just gets deployed and everything starts to back up. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to kick off an ad hoc backup just to show you what DR testing looks like in the real world. But obviously in the production environment, I'm just doing this on an individual server. In a production environment, you would be doing this on a group of servers that could potentially communicate with each other. The default test is it will basically power on the VM. So when you kick it off manually, it asks you to select what recovery point. So by default, it will select the latest recovery point available. But you can, if you wanted to test an older recovery point, for example, if you wanted to do the test retrospectively, you can go in and browse any recovery point and do a DR test on it, which will validate it. It will take it from a warning sign to a green tick. So if I select that now, it's going to invoke the DR test. So it's telling me the job has been submitted successfully. And if I go to my VMware infrastructure, so I've just put the vSphere client up here, you'll see in a second that a VM should get added into the inventory, which is obviously the VM that we're testing. But the key thing about this is that we will be creating a mount point. So that's the VM just been registered there. You can see it, UDP ARVM underscore the name of the machine. If I go into storage here now in the background, sorry, just click on that, configuration, storage, you will also see that I should have showed you this before, but we've actually created an NFS data store onto the backup server, which is called UDP underscore manager. So we're not actually using any storage on the hypervisor. We're only really using the hypervisor to spin up the compute. It will need a degree of RAM and CPUs to support that, but it really just needs the bare minimum to give it the oomph it needs to power on and start and connect to the test network. So what we're seeing now is we create a snapshot of that. We will configure the networking so it's connected into that test subnet, and then the VM will be powered on. Once the VM's powered on, it will make sure it starts up successfully, and it will also make sure it connects into the test network. Once it's completed those tasks, it will then shut down, and then you will get the logs to say that the testing. So you can see now it's just being powered on, and if I go into the console, you'll see that you'll see the Windows startup coming up shortly. So the whole process, takes about 3 or 4 minutes per machine, but it does test it. You can test it sequentially, or you can test it at groups at a time. So it's not necessarily waiting for each machine to finish before it starts the next one. You can concurrently power on resources at the same time as well. So the whole process doesn't take long. So I'm just going to open up a console. Sometimes VMware kind of goes a little bit black, doesn't refresh, but there you go. You can see that now being spun up. And once it's finished, like I say, it will test everything's working, and then it will basically power it off once it's done a successful DR test. So I'm going to leave that to run because I am conscious of time, and this will run through, and you also get a full status of what's going in from the console. It tells you what percentage of the test is completed. So it's marking the boot up stage as 40%. Once it starts up successfully, it will probably jump to about 60%. Then it will test the network 80%, etc. And then it will also make sure it shuts down cleanly and everything else, which will conclude the test. So all this is going on, and you can monitor this under the Jobs tab. It's called Assured Recovery, and you get progress of what it's doing. So it's going through that process now, and it tells you the mount point, etc. So it's all easy to do, and I think that's the test complete. And if I go into the dashboard now, you can see that you've got, it'll refresh the reports. If I click on here, it will take me into the RTO reports. So the server in question, hold on, let me just go up a second. Yeah, is there, and it was telling me that it has been tested. There we go, we just missed it there. So there you go, a assured recovery test. It actually took 3 minutes to spin up that machine for DR testing. And I've actually created an SLA profile. So under the SLA profiles, you can actually put in what machines make up what service. So I'm just trying to find the service that relates to that one. There you go. So I've got, and a successful assured recovery test is 30 minutes. And you can also put in the RTOs for virtual machine recovery, instant VM restore. So similar to the DR testing, you can spin up VMs as instant VMs, and they're actually available to be written to straight away. So I've got an SLA of 30 minutes, a granular restore, bare metal recovery if you were doing it physical to virtual, or physical to physical as well. So you can assign the nodes into the service, give the service a name, which in my case is called web payment. And these services are logical, you can name them after the business services and define the RPOs and the RTOs here. And you can see there, it's reflected in the reports. Those reports, by the way, can be printed out at any time. So you could have a daily report, a weekly report, a monthly report. So if you were testing, lots and lots of servers, you could say, I want to produce a monthly report, and it will show me all the systems that were tested. For DR, how long did it take them to be powered on? Did any fail? And when they fail, it will also give you the error codes, so maybe we've got a problem with the backup recovery point on that node, or there's an infrastructure problem preventing it from working, which again could impact you in the real world doing disaster recovery invocations using instant VM restore or virtual standby. So that's really all I wanted to show you today. Obviously, UDP's got loads of other capabilities in which I could have shown you today, but I just really wanted to focus in on the actual DR testing. So I'm just gonna go back to the presentation. And that was pretty amazing, really, because when you consider a lot of traditional backup solutions don't provide automated DR testing, the fact that you can set up these DR test schedules in the console and actually invoke them into your virtual infrastructure is quite a powerful capability. And it's a real value add, because a lot of organizations that are deliberating on what solutions to look at in the future, having that capability could be the difference between deciding to go with one vendor or another. So it's really important that you can do all that. The great thing about UDP versus a lot of our competitors is the fact that we can also do it on physical backups as well. So any physical backup taken, we can spin it up as an instant VM for DR testing. And that goes for the real world scenarios. If you actually wanted to do genuine disaster recovery, you can spin up all your physical backups as well as virtual backups at a DR site using instant VM or virtual standby and have them up and running very quickly. So the solution is UDP. UDP can come in two ways. It can be delivered as a software solution, which is licensed by the number of CPU sockets. Typically, that's the most common way of licensing UDP. I think it's fair to say that 90% of the customers I deal with are probably 80-90% virtualized now, if not higher. So CPU socket licensing is a very cost-effective way where we physically add up the socket counts across all your physical virtual hosts and any standalone non-virtual server as well. So if you've got physical servers that need backed up, we can just add in the CPU sockets. So it's only the active populated CPU sockets, and we don't care how many CPU cores. It's just the number of populated physical sockets. We can also license by the number of terabytes, so that's the size of one full backup. We don't license on how many DR copies we hold. It's just simply, if you were to do one full backup of all your production servers, how big to the nearest terabyte would that be? And that's before compression and dedupe. So it's the front end size we license that on. You can also license on a per server basis, which is useful for backing up servers in the clouds or remote sites, etc. Now, UDP also has integrated replication, global data deduplication, and compression. We've also now added the ability to back up shares, CIFS and NFS shares running on Windows, NASes, and also Linux/Unix NASes, NFS as well. We've also got the ability to back up Office 365, both Exchange Online and SharePoint Online. OneDrive for Business is on our roadmap, and we're hoping that that will be delivered sometime in the first quarter of next calendar year. So we've also got email archiving capabilities as well to archive Office 365 and on-premise, also Google Mail and others as well. Now, UDP can also be delivered as an appliance. In 2015, we started to launch Arcserve appliances, and they've been hugely popular for us. The idea with the appliances is that it's all about simplicity. So instead of you having to go out and buy a separate Windows server, storage, license all that and manage it, you can buy a box from us that comes with the operating system, the server, the storage, on all the software pre-installed. And then literally all you need to do is rack them, basically plug in all the networking, power them on. They have dual power supplies, etc. So they're really scalable units, and it's simple. You discover the environment, set up your policies, and away you go. So it's UDP in a box, and we use really good Intel SSD cards, nearline SAS drives, so that the experience are all RAID configured. We use RAID 6 in our large appliances and RAID 5 in our small appliances. We've also got cloud services. We've got two services really. We've got what we call Arcserve Hybrid Cloud. This is ideal for customers that want to extend their data protection using UDP in their on-premise environments to replicate into our cloud for off-site data protection, which we call backup as a service, and also DRAS. And I'll explain a bit more about that as we go through the next few slides. We've also got a solution called Cloud Direct, which allows customers, maybe they've got lots of small remote offices, they don't want to invest in having to buy a backup server or an appliance each site. They can actually just put agents and technology on each node and back it up directly to the cloud, and that provides backup as a service and DRAS as well. When we're designing solutions for customers, we do try to what we deliver to an industry best practice called the 3-2-1 or the 1-2-3 backup rule, which basically means that you should have 3 copies of your data. One is the primary on the actual data itself, and you should also have 2 backups. Keep data in at least 2 types of storage or in 2 locations, and one of those copies should be an offline copy. Now, traditionally, tape was always used to provide the offline copy, but more and more recently now, we're using cloud to provide that air-gapped copy of the data, because when you replicate into a cloud, it's going through a completely separate security model. It's not related to your on-premise security, your domains or anything like that. A lot of CryptoLocker and ransomware viruses are spread by using Windows security credentials across a domain. So when you replicate into the cloud, that, you know, no virus can jump from an on-premise environment into the cloud. It's just impossible for it to do that. So it's a really good secure way of securing the data. So what we're doing now is we're doing some really incredible promotions with our appliances, where you can actually buy one appliance and get a second one free. So for example, if you've got, you know, 20 terabytes of data, you might buy a solution that's going to last you for at least 3 years. So you might buy an appliance that's got something like 24 terabytes of storage, and you can get a second box absolutely free when you buy the first one. But not only that, we're doubling the storage capacity at no extra cost. So for example, if you needed the capacity of 24 terabytes on a backup appliance, you would only have to license 12 terabytes. And we would double the capacity on the production one, which would give you 24 terabytes, and we would also give you a second 24 terabyte box for free. So essentially all you're paying for is the cost of a quarter of the data that you're protecting, because, you know, we're doubling it and we're providing the DR. Now that second box can be used however you want. Some customers like to put the second box as a replication target, so they can replicate their production backups to the DR appliance if they've got their own site. Other customers have actually says, look, we'll just put 2 appliances on the network, create 2 storage pools, and we'll back up all our production data across the 2 appliances, and then we can replicate to the cloud to give us our off-site DR copy. So there's various ways that you can deploy these appliances, but the key point here is it's incredibly powerful offer. And it's been hugely successful for us. We've run this promotion last quarter as well, and we do have a deadline of the 14th of December for orders to be placed to take advantage of this promotion. Now, there are different ways as well. Office 365 is now becoming really popular as well. So we've got one of the challenges with Office 365 is that for a lot of backup vendors, it's licensed on the number of mailboxes that you're wanting to protect. And when companies go out and sort of look at what backup solutions are available for Office 365, because bear in mind, Microsoft will only protect your data for 90 days. So if you delete an email in the Microsoft cloud, and you know, you go to Microsoft and say it was shift delete, it's completely gone out of the deleted items folder, they will be able to get that back within a 90-day window. But after 90 days, it's gone forever. And with GDPR now, you know, a lot of companies are starting to realize that that's not acceptable to only have 3 months worth of recover. You know, what happens if I need to go back 6 months or a year? So backup for Office 365 is becoming a really hot, popular item now. But as I was saying before, a lot of companies are starting to realize that licensing on the number of mailbox is really, really expensive. So if an organization, you've got 2,000 or 3,000 Office 365 users, that could cost you a small fortune to license. Now, one of the nice, exciting things about the backup appliances is it's licensed on the capacity. So if you've got 2,000 mailboxes and it equates to 6 terabytes of data, that's fine. You know, you can back up as many Office 365 accounts to your appliance that will fit onto the storage, because we don't license by the number of mailboxes. We just take into account the storage required to protect that Office 365 environment. And in this example, for example, we can replicate your on-premise appliance after you backed up Office 365 into the Arcserve cloud. And again, our cloud is licensed by the deduped compressed data that we send to our cloud. So it's very, very cost effective to hold an offsite DR copy in our cloud as well. So that's just an example of how you could use an appliance in our cloud in combination with each other, which is what we call cloud hybrid. And the cloud hybrid solution for us really extends the data protection. So your on-premise backup server or appliance is taking backups of your workloads, physical, virtual, Office 365. You could be backing up NAS shares, Linux, Windows environments, and we can then replicate that to a virtual appliance in our cloud. Your environment is completely isolated. It's not shared with anybody else's. So each customer gets a completely dedicated virtual environment, that's just set up. They can log in, they can initiate restores from the cloud. You can also recover files using secure FTP and other services as well. Our data centers in Manchester, we'll talk a bit more about that. So it's a UK based data center. And we're also running some really nice promotions on our cloud storage where we'll double the cloud capacity at no extra cost and things like that as well. We've also got DRAS, which extends the backup as a service to provide a Hyper-V 2016 environment, which is basically running in our cloud. So you can actually replicate your backups into our cloud and actually spin them up as compute for disaster recovery. You can also do the DR testing that we were talking about before, the assured recovery. You can actually create DR test schedules if you're a DRAS customer and actually spin up the backups into the cloud. One thing I didn't mention actually is our appliances come with Hyper-V 2016 installed as well. So you can actually use the appliances as DR testing boxes as well. So if you don't want to test your VMs or your physical server backups back into your production virtual environment, you can actually use the Hyper-V services on the appliance and test them on there as well. So again, we can do DR testing and disaster recovery as a service in the cloud using our DRAS service. Another service that's become really popular now is cloud-to-cloud backup of Office 365. So rather than bring your Office 365 backups back on-prem, you can just simply replicate it into a cloud which is managed by us. So you can log into your UDP console, which I just showed you the demo before, looks exactly the same in the cloud, and you can actually set up your policies to back up Office 365 and then restore from the cloud back to your Office 365 environment if you need to do any restores. And that's a very cost-effective service as well because it's licensed by the compressed dedupe data size, and we don't care how many mailboxes that you're backing up. So that's something that could be of interest to you as well. Our cloud data center is, as I've mentioned, is in Manchester. It's a very physically secure environment. It has biometric security, video surveillance, security guards. It's in an unmarked building, security fences, etc. All your data is fully encrypted. We use high levels of encryption around the data, 256-bit AES encryption for UDP, and we use SSL and TLS encryption in flight as well. You've got higher levels of availability. We're also compliant. We've done GDPR compliance testing. We're ISO 9001 and 27001 certified. So you can rest assured that your data is safe in our cloud, and we will look after it, and we provide a highly resilient service available for all our customers. So in summary, you need to start getting savvy with your DR testing. I think too many customers stick their heads in the sand and think, oh, this is just too difficult. Let's just stick our finger in the air and hope the wind blows in the right direction and we never have to go through this. But the unfortunate thing is that you have to prepare for disaster recovery outages. I think just talking about the topic of ransomware, it's in itself is a huge risk to your business. And these ransomware attacks are getting more sophisticated every year that, these viruses and these Trojans and all these cryptolocker viruses have been developed. They're getting more sophisticated. They're targeting your backup servers, for example, to disable them so you can't recover your data. And you need to start thinking about that and thinking, what happens if we got a virus attack and 12 of our critical systems were taken out? How do we recover from that? So if you don't have a DR plan, start thinking about this now. That's my best advice I can give you. You should be, discussing it with your IT manager. You should be discussing it with the business about what your SLAs are around RPOs and RTOs to understand, what systems are critical and what is the business's expectation of how long these systems can be down for and how much data can you afford to lose, which is really determine your RPOs around your critical systems. Do you have a DR site? A lot of organizations do. and they have the luxury that they've got different sites they can leverage for DR, or they pay for a rack space or a private cloud. But if you don't have a second site, you're a business that you've got a single data center, you've got a single point of failure. So you need to consider using either a rack space, or you consider using the cloud for disaster recovery. A lot of organizations now are leveraging cloud because it's not just practical that you've got an offsite location, it's more of an OPEX expenditure as well. So you're not having to fork out lots of money up front for hardware, servers, storage, which you would normally have to do if you were building a DR site for yourself. So it can save you a lot of money by, it's almost leasing the service as opposed to buying the stuff yourself, and somebody else has to manage the infrastructure for you. Think about how technology can help with the DR planning, testing, and invocation of a DR plan. And if you do have data protection or backup solutions that can't provide that technology right now, that's another important conversation to have with your management team. Should we be looking at something that can provide automated DR testing? Technology should assist you and add value. It shouldn't determine how your DR plan is invoked and what your SLAs are. That is a human requirement. So the technology should be configurable to meet the business requirements, so your human ideas can be put into an automated way to benefit the business as a whole. DR technology should be affordable and ideally integrate with your data protection solutions. So you shouldn't have to go out and buy a backup and recovery solution and then go out and fork out a lot of money for a separate DR testing system, because overall you're going to spend a lot more money. And if your IT budgets are like most customers I speak to, you want to get best value for money with any IT acquisition that you make. So having something that can do both is really beneficial. Now, I just want to go back here. What's next? Okay, so we've got a lot of information available on our website. We've actually just launched a brand new global data protection website for arcserve.com. So have a look at that. You want to check it out. Lots of information available on the products. We've got great case studies available as well for success stories that we've deployed in the last 6 to 12, 18 months with customers. You can contact the Arcserve specialist team at any time. Just email emiainfo@arcserve.com. There's also a telephone number there if you wanted to actually speak to someone, and we can get someone to contact you straight away. Lots of information again on our website: data sheets, white papers, case studies, on-demand training videos, etc. You can also try UDP 6.5 update 4 for free for 30 days. So if you've got a storage lab and you want to have a play, do some DR testing, set up some assured recovery test tasks, you can download and test that. Just let us know if you're planning to do that. We can provide POC assistance from the pre-sales team. We can do a WebEx with you just to help you get it set up and configured as quickly as possible, so you can start to benefit from that testing, and you're not getting hung up on how to do basic tasks. Also, we do try and buys with our appliances. So if you like the idea of an appliance, you can actually buy one, but we won't actually transact the order for 30 days. We will hold that in distribution, and then we'll go through a full POC with you to make sure the appliance is fit for purpose and meets the business and technical requirements that you expect, so we can sign off different restores and backup tests, etc., as part of the success criteria. We also do weekly webinars every Friday at 10 a.m. We are introducing varied theme webinars from November onwards, so every week the topic will change. So the link will still be the same though, so if you want to register for any of those, just click on that link, and we will send a copy of these slides out to anybody that registered for the webinar today. So before we finish today, I just want to open up the question line. Now, we're not going to do this on the audio, but what I am going to do is just read out any questions that may have been asked. So I'm just going to bring up the panel. Yeah, question: recovery test for workstation is working? Yes, you can do DR testing on any backup. So we support Windows 7 to Windows 10 with UDP, so you could actually do a DR test on that if you wanted. Is DR testing possible with Arcserve Backup? No, we don't have automated DR testing in Arcserve Backup. This is only available in UDP. Another question, is there a UDP appliance with Arcserve backup and a tape drive? Absolutely yes. We don't provide the tape drive, but we certainly provide mini SAS HBA cards on the appliances, so you can connect a SAS tape drive, or we can put in a fiber channel HBA so you can connect a tape autoloader. We also provide premium licensing where you can fully install and configure Arcserve backup to run alongside UDP on the appliance as well. So I hope that answers that one. The VM you just tested seemed to be relatively small. How is Assured Recovery handling big VMs more than 1 terabyte? Well, we can spin them up. It will take a little bit longer, obviously. That's why we also give the option for very large VMs to mount virtual volumes. So what I tested in the demo today was spinning up a full instant VM, which is the whole machine. For very large file servers, a lot of customers I've worked with do mounting the virtual volumes, which is more of a lightweight test, which allows you to test large, because with a file server, essentially the most important aspect is the structure of the file system and the data integrity. So we can mount those as virtual volumes to speed up the tests. Do you have simple scripts we can use for testing VMs? Well, we do have, we've worked with a lot of customers. You can invoke any Visual Basic script or script, so if you understand things like, wait commands and running various automated tasks, you can put it into a Visual Basic script. And when that environment's up and running, you can invoke those scripts. So that's not a problem. Which UDP product license requires for DR testing? You do need to have the UDP premium license for testing. That's really important. We don't provide that with the advanced license. So the UDP premium provides SLA reporting and DR testing. Okay. No. So is DR testing available in advanced licenses? The answer is no. We only provide Assured Recovery DR testing with the premium license. Okay, lots of questions here. How are Assured Recovery VMs with a plan spun up in ASR task? Is there a sequence as per the backup process? How do they need to match on the VM host? We don't have DR orchestration in the sense of you can control the boot sequence of the VMs in a schedule, but we have ways of working around that. So you can basically put certain systems in different plans that can be invoked at different times. So if certain systems need to be up and running before other systems power on, I've worked with projects where we've done that. For example, having the AD up and running before we try to boot up like a database or an application that relies on Active Directory. So we have ways of being able to do that. Are the IV instant VMs automatically deleted from the host after the Assured Recovery? The answer is yes, because the VMs are only registered in the inventory. The storage they use is from the actual backup storage. So we delete the instant VM from the inventory at the end of the Assured Recovery test. What load is Assured Recovery putting on the backup server? The answer is it's not a huge amount. We just create a mount point and we present the files for DR testing. So obviously there is a load, but it's not significant. The only time I've seen it being significant if you have very, very huge VMs that might take a little bit longer to start up. Obviously, we're having to mount those snapshots and keep that online for longer periods of time. But again, all our servers are well spec'd, certainly with our appliances, and when we recommend building recovery point servers with our customers, if they're building their own, we always put in adequate specifications to support that. What is the OS of the UDP appliance? It's Windows 2016. I hope that answers your question. Okay, I think that's a lot of questions there that I've answered. So if you do have any more questions, you can email amiainfo@arcserve.com and we will try and get back to you on there. So I hope you've enjoyed today's session. We've covered quite a lot in a very short period of time. I'm just over the time allocation, so I'm going to end the session today. I hope you've enjoyed it. This session will be recorded, so you'll be able to get access a copy if you want to listen again. So thank you very much for your time and have a great day. Thank you.